Originally, I wanted this video to be a vlog. As of filming, I live a decently unconventional life. Let me take you back a few months. It was March, I was a part-time barista, I'd been accepted into a master's program starting in the fall, and I was beginning to get the sense that my employers were about to fire me. To make a long story short, as a legal adult, I had to be paid a lot more than my high school age coworkers, and the business was struggling. Add on the fact that my tattoos and piercings and willingness to stand up for myself didn't vibe with my bosses, I was finding myself scheduled for fewer and fewer hours. So I reached out to an old employer, and now I'm a boat detailer at a marina on Georgian Bay. It's a lovely place to live. The area is locally known as the 30,000 Islands, or the Archipelago, and it has 840 native plant species, 170 breeding birds, 44 mammal species, and 34 reptile and amphibian species, some of which are rare and iconic. I live on a cottage on a smaller lake nearby, and I thought I would make one of those day in the life at my cottage videos you see all the time from bigger lifestyle channels. And then I realized that most days I go to work, come home, sit on the dock, eat dinner, and watch TV. Not thrilling. There are days where I go do something fun, but I wouldn't say it's typical or average for me, and I don't want to give off the wrong idea about some luxurious or crazy life that I'm living. Facing that problem, I realized what I actually want is to tell you what makes this place so great. See, this area isn't just where Ontario residents go to unwind in the summer, it's a biosphere reserve. UNESCO has designated this as a place for learning, sustainable development, and conservation. According to UNESCO, a biosphere reserve has three main functions: conservation of biodiversity and cultural diversity, economic development that is socioculturally and environmentally sustainable, and logistical support underpinning development through research, monitoring, education, and training. Essentially, this is an area that is slowly growing in population, and people come here just like me because this is a great place to be. But if we want to keep it as it is, we need to be very careful about how it grows. We need to focus on keeping the plants, animals, landscapes, and cultures native to this place protected so that everyone can enjoy them. And UNESCO wants to do that through scientific research and public engagement. There are 19 biosphere regions in Canada. The goal of the distribution of these places is that each one represents a unique and iconic location for its landscapes and for the animals that live within it. The first thing that I think is really interesting about this biosphere takes me back to this map. See this other location just below Georgian Bay? That's the Niagara Escarpment. These two biospheres are so close together because they were basically created by the same prehistoric geological events. So this all started 2.4 billion years ago in the interior of the supercontinent Kenorland. Within that supercontinent was the geological area known as the Southern Province. On the perimeter of the Southern Province, there was a lot of geological activity which formed its own group of sediments known as the Huronian supergroup. Now, what's so cool about the Huronian supergroup is how well preserved it is. It's an incredibly accessible database for this area during the Paleoproterozoic era, showing everything from hot, arid weather to glacial periods to the changing levels of oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. Rocks in this group include quartzite, argillite, metaconglomerate, metasandstone, and more. 1.8 million years ago, during the formations of the supercontinent Nina, collisions caused the supergroup to fold, creating the La Cloche Mountains, which is today at the northern shores of Lake Huron near Manitoulin Island. This area is just gorgeous, and those quartzite rocks I mentioned earlier are iconic to the area. Just to the east of the La Cloche Mountains is the Killarney area. This is the boundary between the southern province and another geological province called Grenville. This province is made up of the leftovers of the Grenville Mountains, which were once as high as the Himalayas and 400 kilometers wide, before being worn down by the elements. These leftovers are the base of what used to be those mountains, so these rocks were formed deep underground in over 750 degrees Celsius, under immense pressure. The gneiss and migmatite there was so hot it became soft enough to melt and mix, making this swirling, watery texture on the exposed rock of the Canadian Shield. And that's what we call the large area of exposed rock around Hudson Bay. Flooding during the Paleozoic period is what brought sediments like shale, silt, clay, sand, and coral to the area. Now, this entire southwestern edge of Georgian Bay is the Niagara Escarpment. Actually, the Niagara Escarpment goes quite far from Niagara proper. The reason it's named this is not so much for its location, but its destination. In the Pleistocene epoch, massive, sometimes 2-kilometer thick sheets of ice advanced and retreated several times. This scraped away at the softer sediments, causing the collapse of harder ones, leading to the formation of large cliffs. A popular theory is that this advancing ice is what made the shape of the eastern coastline of the Bruce Peninsula. Then, as the ice made its retreat, the meltwater carved out gorges, rivers, and internationally iconic waterfalls. And so that means when I'm swimming off of my dock in the Georgian Bay biosphere, I'm in water that will travel out to Georgian Bay, to the rest of Lake Huron, down past Detroit to Lake Erie, and then north to Niagara Falls. And actually, that water is then going to go up past Kingston to the St. Lawrence River, by Montreal, and eventually out to the Atlantic Ocean. It's all connected. Eventually, of course, humanity made a home in this land. This was as early as 9000 BC. By around 1640 Common Era, there were roughly 10 distinct groups in the Georgian Bay biosphere area, and these folks are sort of retroactively organized based on the language they spoke and their dialect under that language umbrella. Algonquian-speaking people lived in the northern regions, and Iroquoian-speaking people lived in the southern ones. The Algonquians were semi-nomadic. In the summer, groups would gather around fishing spots and travel by canoe, and disperse in the winter and travel by toboggan or snowshoe. There were some groups who spoke either Odawa or a Proto-Odawa dialect, and one group who may have been Proto-Ojibwe, although today Ojibwe is sometimes referred to as Anishinaabemowin. In Anishinaabemowin, Georgian Bay is referred to as Midido-Gummi, or Great Lake of the Spirit. The Iroquoians lived in small villages that would relocate every 10 to 30 years because they farmed about 80% of their food, and those intense practices meant it was handy to move to new, unfarmed soil after a few decades. Villages operated as a part of two larger units, again organized by their dialect under the Iroquoian umbrella, the Huron-Wendat and the Petun. Both groups grew corn, beans, squash, and pumpkins, and the Petun also specialized in growing tobacco. In the summer, Iroquoian women would focus on farming, and in the winter they would craft and manufacture goods. The men would typically focus on fishing and hunting, as well as trade relations. Trading was good between all of the different groups in this area, especially back and forth between the Algonquians and the Iroquoians because of their different specialties. I can't find much information about populations, but today we seem to think that at least the Petun had 8 villages between Nottawasaga Bay and the Mad River, totaling to a population of about 8,000. That's not crowded, but it's far from primitive. When French explorers arrived to the area in the 1630s, the Huron were the first to engage in trade with them. When the French returned home with their hot new beaver pelts, interest in the area exploded. When the French came back, they brought tons to trade as well as missionaries, hoping to convert the locals to Christianity. They would arrive through the now aptly named French River, and if you check the map of that provincial park today, you'll see a lot of little islands noted for being where Jesuit priests drowned or were buried. Those rapids can be serious business. This boom in fur trade is also when the Hudson's Bay Company established its first route from the Great Lakes to the Hudson's Bay. Of course, Europeans didn't just bring trade and priests. New disease carried over from Europe absolutely decimated the native populations, especially the Huron-Wendat and the Petun. By 1800, villages of Europeans had popped up all over the place surrounding trading posts. However, it wasn't long before the fur trade began to decline and settlers turned to natural resources. This is actually where Parry Sound came from. It's one of the few remaining lumber-era towns, built up around a small mill at the mouth of the Seguin River. The mill prohibited alcohol, so another town popped up across the river called Perry Harbor, where alcohol was welcome. So people would work at the mill on one side of the river and then make their way across to party. There were also other lumber camps in Magnetawan, Pickerel, and Seguin. Parry Sound, by the way, is an underrated town today. A lot of other populated areas, more towards Muskoka, get a lot more attention, so to me, Parry Sound is a bit of an underdog that I like to root for. If you find yourself in the area, I have some recommendations. If you like breweries, Trestle and Norse are both great. Trestle wins out on gorgeous location, but the burgers at Norse are unbeatable. The fitness trail runs right by Trestle and takes you around the harbor, by the beach, and over a nice pedestrian bridge on the river. On Tuesdays, there's a market at the town square, which has a lot of good local makers and food. My favorite maker is the Muddy Handprint Pottery Studio. Good prices, amazing quality. If you're downtown, stop by Barely Used Books. It's a labyrinthian fire hazard stuffed with every book under the sun. And White Squall, an amazing outdoor supply store that sells local backcountry maps, information books, and could equip you for basically anything, is just down the block. And if you're just in town for errands, the Perry Sound Farmers Market has the best produce, fresh squeezed juice, and amazing ginger cookies. Anyways, with natural resources reinvigorating trade, the settlers went crazy, chopping, fishing, and hunting. Ultimately, the area was sucked dry of useful and tradable resources. That, combined with the influx of sea lamprey and the proliferation of the double-crested cormorant, ruined the fishing industry here in a way that it has never recovered from. So with the most of the native population killed by disease and most European villages abandoned, the area was left empty, and for the first time in a couple of centuries, the Georgian Bay was quiet. Those remaining in the area instead turned to the tourism industry, which was booming by the early 1900s. You'll find some people here with summer properties that they share among their siblings, parents, cousins, aunts, and uncles because their grandparents or great-grandparents bought the property for a very low price back then, and it's been passed down. Look, if I could sit here and tell you about the 840 native plant species, 170 breeding birds, 44 mammal species, and 34 reptile and amphibian species here in the Georgian Bay biosphere, I would. But I don't think that would be very fun or accessible content in terms of video length, so instead I've narrowed it down to my top 5 of each. My main metric for these top 5 are as follows. How exemplary of the biosphere is it, and do I personally think it's exceptionally cool? Let's start with the most difficult category, plants. If I was just talking about my personal cool metric, I would probably be mentioning a lot of herbs and flowers like wild bergamot and purple coneflower, because I love plants that are pretty and have a history of usefulness. I also love berries, so woodland strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, and red currant are top contenders, and the coniferous trees in Georgian Bay are certainly iconographic, and yes, I am cheating right now, but I have to give my shoutouts. Anyways, top 5. I mean, nobody in history has ever complained about a black-eyed Susan. These flowers are common in Ontario, but here specifically they shine. You'll see them in the grassy patches between the slabs of rock right by the water, and the yellow and black complements the pink, gray, and green so well. And once they establish themselves in an area, they spread like wildfire, making these big swaths peppered with color. They bloom at the peak of summer, they're impressively hardy, and the birds and insects love them. Ciliate hoar moss not only has a funny name, but is also common here because of the unique landscape. Also known as white-tipped moss, hoar moss thrives in the acidic, sun-baked rock of the Canadian Shield. There's something really lovely about a squishy blanket of this moss over the unforgiving rock. When it's dry, it fades to a grayish green, and then it drinks up the rainfall and becomes incredibly vibrant. Common is an understatement when it comes to the common bracken here. This stuff is absolutely everywhere. If you're driving down a dirt road or walking through the forest here, take a second, look left, and look right. Not up at the sky, not straight at the trees, but down. 90% chance you're staring at a sea of common bracken. On its own, not a terribly impressive plant, but in sheer numbers here, it's subtle and stunning. Common bracken's cooler name is eagle fern. It distributes easily because its spores are so light and can grow back in numbers rapidly because it doesn't actually die in the winter. In the fall, it dies back to ground level, but it stays alive in the form of an underground rhizome. And colonies of these rhizomes can live for as long as 650 years. Blowbush blueberries are a signature of the Georgian Bay biosphere for multiple reasons. First of all, like I said, a berry plant had to make the list because I think there's something really special about native, edible plants. And most berries need a dormant season to thrive, but don't really need deep soil for their root system, making them perfect for the cold winters and shallow dirt here. In the fall, the leaves turn a gorgeous, deep red color. Second, blueberries make the list because of their incredible hardiness. They thrive in acidic soil, they're fire tolerant, and they don't need much water. But the main reason I mentioned blueberries is because of how many animals here love them. Not just eat them for sustenance, but actively prefer them. In fact, you're just as likely to find blueberries in scat around here as you are to find them on a blueberry bush. They're a staple in the ecosystems of Georgian Bay. For number 1, I don't just have a type of tree, I have a specific tree. Without a doubt, the coolest, most famous plant in the biosphere is the windswept white pine in Killbear Provincial Park. This tree is symbolic of a larger phenomenon in the Georgian Bay biosphere called windform, in which trees are literally formed by the wind. Since they grow slowly on shores and cliffs where the wind here is constant, usually in a single direction, the trees appear to be leaning away from the wind. It's a recurring motif in paintings from the Group of 7, and for whatever reason, this tree in Killbear Provincial Park has become the windswept tree. Sadly, the windswept pine appears to be, however slowly, dying. Its growth rate has slowed, a major limb has died off, and it's starting to hollow. So if you're in the area and you'd like to see it, make sure you do it, like I did this summer in crazy wind right before a rainstorm. Whoa! It's a gorgeous park. Other than seeing the tree, I also recommend the quick walk to the lighthouse and the longer Lookout Point trail. Birds are the easiest to spot of all the animals in the biosphere, aside from your Canadian classics like chipmunks and squirrels. I've been getting into bird watching for the past year or so, and I've found it especially rewarding here. You really just have to find a nice place to sit with a pair of binoculars on hand and wait. Even if you don't do that, you'll hear them every morning, and if you pull out your Merlin ID app, you can identify them without spotting them. Doing that reveals an incredibly diverse cast of players. There needed to be a warbler here in this list because they have a fantastic color. You'll see some red and blue birds here, but the yellow to me really stands out. The pine warbler earned their name by taking up residence in the pine woods of eastern North America. I found it pretty rare to see them in action, but apparently they forage in pine trees as well as on the ground, looking for insects, seeds, and berries. Of course, the common loon had to make the list. It's iconic across all of Canada, but here they're as easy to spot as any backyard bird. And the call they make around sunrise and sunset is the perfect soundtrack to this landscape. It's not uncommon to see a mated pair hunting together on the lakes and rivers here. They especially prefer deep, wide lakes with lots of islands and coves that are populated with small fish. You won't see them eat. They'll just duck underwater where they catch and consume their prey and then resurface some meters away. When I was a kid, for some reason I thought hummingbirds were tropical, so I was very excited to learn I could see them here in Canada. As it turns out, they migrate to Mexico for winter, but they spend their breeding season in Ontario. I have a feeder here, and I'd say I see hummingbirds feeding off of it at least a dozen times a day. I don't know if that's just my area, or if it's because this feeder has been here for a long time, or if these birds really are that common. They're quite hard to spot without drawing them to a feeder, but you can catch a glimpse of the male ruby-throated hummingbirds by their bright red patch. These birds, by the way, fight a lot. Hummingbirds can have and defend food territories, but from my observations, the other hummingbirds aren't very respectful of that territory. And considering that their heart rate can get as high as 1,260 beats per minute, these fights are just a blur. The pileated woodpecker. Punching a tree with their face at 7 a.m. on a Saturday? Legendary. The holes they make in trees are actually thought to be crucial to their habitat, as it makes cavities for other birds to make their nest and speeds up the degrading process of dying trees. They're also critical for controlling insect populations by eating carpenter ants and beetle larvae, although they also eat nuts and berries. The best fact about pileated woodpeckers is that we're not really sure how they survive attacking solid wood with their skull a million times a day. Some theorize that their skull is a little spongy, others think that its tongue wraps around its brain to act as a seatbelt, and others think they're just built tougher than us. The great blue heron is by far my favorite bird to see in the Georgian Bay biosphere. They like to hang out in shallow waters and wetlands, and they blend right into the scenery until they take off, flying silently and effortlessly. In the winter, their range is as far as the Caribbean. Really, their focus is on being in a wetland, regardless of if it's freshwater or saltwater, a shoreline, a marsh, or a swamp. Similarly, they're quite opportunistic hunters. They prefer fish, but they'll also go for frogs, lizards, snakes, crustaceans, insects, and even sometimes ground squirrels. Even hunting just fish, their methods are broad. They most commonly wade through shallow water and spear fish with their bill, but they can also dive into water head first or feet first. Despite the fact that I've only ever seen these birds alone, they breed in colonies called heronries. A heronry has anywhere from 5 to 500 nests, and is usually in the trees 4 to 5 kilometers from their feeding spots. These spots are typically difficult to access on foot as a means of protection from predators. So do me a favor right now and go look at iNaturalist's list of observed mammalian species in the Georgian Bay area. I promise you, somewhere in that list is your new favorite animal. There's more variety than you'd think as well, so this was tough to narrow down. Honorary mention goes to the mink, 2 of which have been co-workers of mine this summer. I'm still not sure if they hate each other or playfully love each other.
Oh, there we are.
Yeah.
You run away.
Oh no! He's coming to get me!
Run away.
And deer, because despite being one of the most widely distributed land mammals in North America, seeing one is still kind of magical. See the tail of the other one in the back? I just caught it. Spotted.
Isn't that fun?
Oh, did you see that? Oh my god, pine martens are so adorable. They were a popular animal during the fur trade, but since that significant hit to the population, they've made a decent comeback. In some places in the United States, they're considered extirpated, and there have been some reintroduction efforts at play as well. You won't see them often because they tend to stay pretty spaced out with a population density of about 0.4 to 2.5 individuals per square kilometer in areas with abundant prey. They're also fair weather creatures, favoring summer and traveling mostly under the snow in the winter. I actually didn't know there were river otter here until I started writing this video. The only time I've ever seen one is at the aquarium in Vancouver. Their reputation precedes them. They're cute, they swim around holding stuff in their tiny hands, and they like to splash and play in the water. In the winter, apparently, they like to slide along the ice to travel. They're an exclusive to the North American continent. Unfortunately, their range has reduced a lot since Europeans arrived, and their population is largely affected by water pollution as well. Like pine martens, conservationists are working to help increase their numbers with reintroduction and habitat restoration efforts. The eastern wolf, or timber wolf, is a great species for this list because it's only really found in the Great Lakes region of Canada. Sadly, it's a threatened species due to a long history of hunting and trapping, both for the wolf's furs and for fear of them attacking people and livestock. Today, they're a protected species. Their evolutionary history is still up for debate. Some think it's a subspecies of gray or red wolves, or an ancestor of both gray wolves and coyotes, or a hybrid gray and red wolf. That question gets even muddier when you look at the species today, because with such small numbers, some eastern wolves have begun to mate with coyotes due to a lack of same species mates, making coyote-eastern wolf hybrids. These wolves tend to hunt mid-sized prey like deer and beavers, and like me, they also enjoy the occasional blueberry. The smaller, slightly more chill cousin of the grizzly, black bears are the campground terrorists of Georgian Bay. They have a reputation around here for busting into coolers, breaking into cars, and poking their nose anywhere so much as a tube of toothpaste can be found. That being said, an encounter is still decently uncommon. It's a popular misconception that there are also grizzly bears here, which are much larger animals with a much more aggressive reputation. Those are found further west. And yes, I did call them campground terrorists, but unless the bear is very accustomed to humans, a car alarm or a bear horn tend to do the trick with these animals. And of course, packing your campsite properly. If you're looking for a beast of an animal in the Georgian Bay biosphere, look no further. If you're looking for a protective mama animal, you can also look no further. These bears are the perfect combination. And fun fact, their sense of smell is about 7 times more sensitive than dogs. Moose are the world's tallest and largest extant species of deer, and the tallest land mammal in North America. Hunting and habitat loss has significantly reduced their range, making sightings sporadic and hard to pin down. Canada holds the largest moose population, and can be found anywhere except Nunavut and PEI, so I know it's bold to have it as my number 1 for the Georgian Bay biosphere. But moose are my white whale. I've seen one once out of the corner of my eye, not 2 minutes from where I'm sitting right now, and never again. And even with that limited experience, I can tell you they're magical. Compared to bears, these massive creatures are relatively peaceful animals. They can pack a huge punch if they want to, but they're also herbivores. They like to browse for fresh shoots of trees, pondweed, and soft leaves. They're mostly soloists. They only gather in groups during mating season. Now, comparing them to bears is a bit of a disservice because it implies that moose and bears are even remotely similar in size. However big you think a moose is, think bigger. The largest ever confirmed is measured at 7 feet 8 inches tall at the shoulder. And then there's the antlers, which grow new every year and make their overall size even bigger. Before I get into amphibians and reptiles, I have to tell you my favorite amphibian story from this summer. I was leaving for work one morning, locking my door, when I hear something rustling in the leaves behind me, and I turn around just in time to see a frog rolling uncontrollably down the hill until it just disappeared under the deck. Common mud puppies make the list almost entirely based on name. They're slimy, foot-long or so salamanders that live in North American lakes, rivers, and ponds. What's interesting about these creatures is that we're not entirely sure why they don't metamorphosize like most other amphibians. A popular theory is that they're forever juveniles because of a mutation in their thyroid hormone receptors, or that they don't have the ability to regulate thyroid hormones. This is a fact that made me realize I have no idea what thyroid hormones do, but apparently they're very important for metabolism and growth. Bullfrogs are the one kind of frog here that I've seen and gone, whoa, that is a big frog. They get to about 4 to 6 inches in length, and if there's a frog bigger than that out there, I don't think I want to know about it. Male American bullfrogs have a really interesting social behavior where they gather in groups called choruses. They gather to sing, literally as a chorus, to attract females. They only do this for a few days, however, before breaking up the band and all the frogs separate to seek new choruses. More dominant males, established through physical displays, get center stage in the chorus. A weird fact about American bullfrogs is that they're invasive in Utah, where the Department of Natural Resources has been encouraging residents to catch and cook them for food to control the population via Twitter. Five-line skinks are fascinating, adorable little creatures. Juveniles and most females have a bright blue tail to signal to the often quite aggressive males that they aren't a threat to the male's territory. The only ones I've seen are quite small, but apparently they can get up to 8.5 inches long and have been noted to eat newborn mice, frogs, and other lizards, as well as their usual insects and berries. The species is surprisingly parental for a reptile. Lots of reptile species lay their eggs and let the hatchlings sort of fend for themselves, focusing on volume of eggs rather than survival. Some skinks will create communal nests in which mothers will take turns guarding the eggs while others forage for food. They also pee on the eggs sometimes to maintain proper humidity levels. The Blandings turtle is one of those animals that I love because it looks like a cartoon drawing of itself. This turtle has a very limited range, living mostly around the Great Lakes. They like wetlands and basking in the sun, but will often be seen far from their habitats during nesting season. And this is a turtle that doesn't really seem to age. They experience the passage of time, but they don't seem to experience any kind of deterioration as a result of it. Like many other animals I've mentioned, the Blandings turtle is an endangered species due to habitat destruction as well as nest predation. These are gentle creatures who rarely bite and are pretty defenseless when it comes to dangerous human and animal interactions. If you see a turtle nest of any kind in a provincial park here, let a park staff member know so that they can provide protection for the nest. Having the eastern Massasauga rattlesnake as my number one is controversial, I know. They are the only venomous snake found in Ontario, so they have quite a reputation. But being bit is very rare. In fact, there's only about 2 to 3 bites reported per year, and no one has died of Massasauga rattler venom in over 50 years. The only 2 recorded deaths ever from this snake's bite involved the person not seeing a doctor about it. If you get treated for a bite, it's a guarantee you'll be fine. But for all that, they're pretty shy animals, and surprisingly small for a snake, maxing out at about 30 inches in length. They actually look kind of short and fat in person. Massasauga rattlers, as they're more commonly known, can be found only in Ontario, so their native range is quite small even before you consider habitat loss. Today, they're endangered and seeing one is quite uncommon. However, habitat loss isn't the main cause of the species' population decline. Despite being relatively harmless, especially compared to some other snakes around the world, they have such a bad reputation that people have historically killed them on sight. But again, they're shy, timid creatures that only bite as a last resort. So, if you see one, please give it space rather than attacking. You're more likely to be bit trying to approach one than leaving it be. Despite being the only rattlesnake in Ontario, they are not the only snake who rattles in Ontario. The eastern fox snake and the eastern milk snake are known to take advantage of the Massasauga rattler's reputation by imitating the rattling motion and deliberately disturbing leaves as to make a rattling sound. Despite spending as much time here as I have throughout my life, I haven't seen nearly all of the plants and animals that I've mentioned here. That's because, I think, I've barely scratched the surface. And that's what's so amazing to me about the world. If you're willing to get into it and get obsessed, you could spend your entire life enamored with one place. Biosphere regions are perfect examples of places many people have become enamored with. So much so that they've decided to protect and preserve it. And I think that's pretty cool. Especially considering that this is an area with a lot of endangered or threatened species. My life here these last 4 months has been far from idyllic. There's not much in the way of infrastructure and resources available in case of emergencies, and things happen all the time. I've been cut off from my home due to a deadly car accident, with the detour route changing my drive from 5 minutes to 3 hours. I've lost power multiple times. I've had to shelter in place for a tornado warning. I've worked in 40-degree heat, torrential rain, and wildfire smoke. I'm lucky that I haven't had to experience it, but the healthcare here is understaffed and under-resourced. I lost power again, and I was gonna make a cute video of me, like, making dinner without electricity, like on the, camping stove and stuff, and then it was too hot for me to wear, like, pants, so I thought I would just keep that to myself and just take a video of the meal. And I ate it really fast, because I've been sweating a lot today, because it's 38 degrees Celsius. So that's where I'm at right now. Hungry, no power, no fan, no stove, pantsless. I've had a lot of opportunities to ask myself if this place is worth the tough times. And while I don't think it's for everybody, for me, these past 4 months has been worth it. I can't really speak on the winter yet. This is a summer home, so it's not equipped with winterized water or an effective heating system. And in September, I'm moving to southern Ontario to go to grad school. But that means that there's even more of Georgian Bay still left for me to explore one day, the winter version. And I can't even imagine that this place could have more to offer, but it does. So if you have a chance, come visit the Georgian Bay Biosphere. I really love it, and I think you will too. Actually, the Niagara Escarpment goes quite... fucking bug. Ah! There's a grasshopper on my microphone. Focus. Filming outside. Ooh. There are hummingbirds fighting right next to me. And it's pissing me off. Proto-Odawa dialect and bug on my chin. Fuck. Off my arm right into my ear. Ah! Get off. Oh, that's just blood. You. Die. Common bracken's cooler name is hummingbird. Oh, fuck. Hummingbirds. They really swoop you. And there's a bug in my hairline. I can feel it. Or I'm losing it. I'm not talking about my favorite bugs. Hummingbird just shit on my deck. Does that show up on camera? That hummingbird? Fucking... ugh! Life flashed before my eyes. Is that more blood? That's more blood. Oh, it's a lot more blood. Oh, it's a lot more blood. Oh, I'm bleeding.